Okay, so the first thing I'll say is that normally when I talk about the work that I do, I have about a day with people, and I would engage you in doing the stuff so that you could actually feel what it feels like to do this stuff. So 14 minutes was a huge challenge, but I've 12. 12?
Yeah, that's right.
14!
And it was a minute and a half.
Oh. Okay, so I'll just begin by introducing you to my connection with NLP. So I think I did my NLP practitioner course in 2006. It's quite a long time ago, and I have been definitely the member of the family, like pokeroo. You know that I did it, but you don't know where I am. And that speaks to the introverted me, the person who goes out and thinks for a long time and spends a lot of time in my head. So when I was asked to participate and speak at this symposium, I did a lot of thinking about how my work does connect with NLP, because I don't use it head on. I think I use it in everything that I do. It's a number of threads that pieces through the art of what I do. So the first is that one of the things I got from Linda was that the power of a story can lead people to wonderful and amazing desirable outcomes. So I'm going to use stories today. Hopefully I won't tell them too long or I'll be over my time. The second was the importance of congruency and that word. I haven't thought about that word in a while. But I know that when I'm congruent, business flows toward me. I know that when I'm congruent, money flows toward me. I know that when I'm congruent with what I'm doing, everything works. Click, 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 click. It all falls into place. So it feels nice that I'm entering a new year of business where I am totally and completely focused in everything that I do about the things that I'm very passionate about. Anyway, I'm going to begin with a story, the story that got me engaged in this work. I heard the story at a pre-conference little early morning session. I don't know if you've ever gone to those, where there's a large conference. They have these little early 7 in the morning things where people give a little talk. So the talk was called Positive Deviance, which sounded really naughty, so I went because I thought, oh, it's edgy and bad, which is very not me, so I thought, I'll go. And this man named Henry Lipsmanowicz told the story, a true story, about the birth of this movement called Positive Deviance. Is anyone familiar with Positive Deviance? Awesome, okay. So the story is that in the early 1990s, a husband and wife couple named Monique and Jay Sternin were working for an organization called Save the Children. Now, Save the Children had been working in Vietnam to try and lower the rate of childhood malnutrition in some specific areas. And the childhood malnutrition rate in that area at the time was in excess of 60%, which is unacceptable, right? So these are little kids who are not eating properly and they're sick. And then they said to this couple, we want you to go in, we've tried everything. We've tried sending money, we've tried sending food, we've tried education, and by the way, you do not have a budget. So you don't have any money to do anything, but we're going to send you and hopefully you'll be able to do something. So what they decided to do was to flip the whole way in which people intervene in systems like that, and they decided to, instead of tell people what to do, to sit at the feet of the people who touch the problem and get them to discover and unearth their data, to look at it, to make sense of it, and to find their own way forward. So essentially what they did was to have lots and lots of conversation and come to the conclusion that they really needed to look at the 40% of people who were not malnourished. If 60% of the children were malnourished, what about these 40%? What are they doing, right? Because something must be going right. So they talked to those people and they said, okay, there are obviously some differences in things going on, but instead of saying, okay, we've talked to this group over here and here's what they're doing right, and now we, the expert consultants, are going to say, here people, here are your checklist of things to do that will make your families healthier. Instead, they decided to gather people for community meals. Price of admission, bring your kids, and some food. So people walk into the community meals and they bring their kids. And as you can guess, there are some skinny kids and some chubby kids. And all of a sudden, there's some social proof. I see. 40% of these kids do not have a problem. But no one has to say it because it's right in front of your eyes. And then over the course of this series of community meals, they start to discuss what they're eating. And they discovered 3 very simple things that were going right in these areas where kids were not malnourished. They were feeding more often through the day. They were not allowing the kids to self-feed, so they were kind of shoveling it in. And they were also using uncommon foods that were normally not on the diet that you could find in rice paddies like shrimp, crab, and potato beans. Simple things, right? So through the course of this community development and changing the way in which people talk to one another from a point of shame to a point of empowerment, these people were able to change the way they do things and to disseminate a new practice that was positively deviating from the norm, thus positive deviance. So essentially what struck me most was that the results of that project are still engaged today. 2 generations of people are now affected by it. Millions of children now eat better and live better and are now adults because of this little intervention where people sat at the feet of the people who owned the problem. So that was what inspired me to get into the work. Now, how do I advance the slide? Tell me that. Oh, okay, so we have a problem in North America. Let's take it from Vietnam and move to North America. So in North America, we have a problem in hospitals. And the problem is, if you go into a hospital, you might go in there to be treated for one thing, but you might probably come out with something really gross that only happens in hospitals. This could be an antibiotic-resistant organism like MRSA, C. difficile, or VRE, just to name a few. It's a really big problem. Lots of people have stories. I remember I sort of mentioned my work to Erika, and she was like, I know someone who had that happen. It was really serious. You can lose a limb, or lose a life, or lose a loved one because of these things. It happens all too often. Over 100,000 people a year across North America die from these things every year, unnecessarily. And the biggest problem is that it's passed from patient to healthcare worker to patient. Okay, so the problem is complex. Much like the malnutrition problem in Vietnam, the problem is a number of things. It's complex. You can't really wrap your arms around it. We can think that it's all about cleaning your hands, but cleaning your hands is a piece of the puzzle. There's also, like, when do you put on your gloves? When do you take off your gloves? When do you put on your personal protective equipment? When do you not? How do you use surveillance to find out if people have these things? When do you discharge them? Do you discharge them? There are like a zillion things, so it becomes very complex. It's an important problem. People are dying unnecessarily. Their lives are changed. It's incredibly undignified to go through these types of infections. It's intractable. People have tried everything. You've seen the posters. Please clean your hands, right? People try all sorts of things, education being the number one thing they try. And they're measurable. I don't know if you know, but you can check on hospital websites for their current infection rates, and you can see how well your local hospital is doing on these things. So they're already tracking the information. And in order to engage in the type of work I do, rapid feedback of data to the people who create the data is very important. They need to see that they're being successful. So what if I told you the following? That 5 hospitals changed collectively and dropped their infection rates by an average of 50% in 1 year. They did this by changing their conversations. Within one target unit, staff dropped their rate by 100%. That means no hospital-acquired infections. Not a one. And they did this using comedy improv. Just ponder that for a second. So I'm going to tell you another story. And the story is about that comedy improv. How much time do I have?
About 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. So what they did was they got the people together, and we had been working for a while, getting them into different conversations, and the big thing that was coming up for them was, oh, I love the work that we're doing, getting people into conversation, but I would never talk to a nurse. Oh, but I would never talk to a hospital cleaner. Or the cleaner said, I would never talk to a doctor. What became apparent was that the problem was not the practice. The problem was the relationship and how people engage with one another to talk talk about a big problem that means something to them. And so I went out on a limb and said, what if we just sort of staged it? And comedy improv wasn't my idea, it was a technique that we use in this work. So what if we did a comedy improv and we just sort of put up the problem for everyone to see? So they came up with this funny skit about a nurse named Nurse Jackson, and she was called Nurse Jackson because we used Michael Jackson music throughout, and I can't explain why because it would take too long. But anyway, it had to do with these gloves and when to put on the gloves and how she was sort of touching everything with the gloves and ends up at the end infecting one patient from another. And the gold wasn't in the comedy improv they did, the gold was in the conversation they had afterwards. And how they said, you know, all of these things happen every day, maybe not all at once like they did in the improv, but every day these things happen. So how do we help each other to get here, to get to a new place? And what they did was they decided to have a little code word for when I need to tell you you haven't washed your hands. So instead of saying, I noticed, Dr. So-and-so, you haven't washed your hands, I'd say, Nurse Jackson. And they go, oh, right. And it wasn't because Nurse Jackson was any more powerful than anything else. It was that they had an experience together. They laughed. They laughed together. They shared a congruence about what challenges them. They were able to speak to one another on a level about a problem that they influence on a daily basis and make a huge change. So what they did essentially over the course of this year and then 18 months was to change and shift their culture from one of fear and siloed groups into one of accountability, sharing, and integrity of purpose. We are here to serve the patients. We are here to care for people. I don't even know if I'm moving through my flesh. So there is a little picture up there in improv. And the work that we do is called Flow, or Frontline Ownership. It's about including and unleashing everyone to solve problems, being highly sensitive to local conditions. What works over there doesn't necessarily work over here, so we need to ask the people over here what we're going to do. And it involves acting your way into a new way of thinking. So instead of getting it in your mind, how we're going to do it, let's just do it. Feel how it feels. Be the thing you want to do. I love this statement, culture eats strategy for lunch. This is why we intervene at the level of culture. You can make all the strategies you want if you don't have a culture that supports it. You're not going to get action, you're not going to get change, and you're not going to have people engage with it. Thus, we've seen posters, and they only get how much hand hygiene compliance in hospitals? Anyone know the average? Somewhere around 60%. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. These are the next things that I'm going on with. But I'd like to leave you with a thought that actually ties in with a couple other things that the speakers have said so far, is that, you know, public sector organizations are very worried. They're worried about spending your money on things that don't matter. And I would like to connect all of you with the idea that relationships matter, love matters, trust matters. These things that people might say is superfluous to the task of taking care of people in hospitals is actually the underlying foundation of what keeps it together and helps people be successful. So the more we talk about that, and the more we encourage people to do innovative things like host a comedy improv on their floor, I want to connect you with the success of that one particular group and numerous other groups I've worked with that proves that it works. Relationships matter, trust matters, love matters.